Good morning, good morning, good morning. Facebook, make sure that we can sync up. All right. Should be public. Let's see. Yes, it is. All right, happy Friday. For those of you who today is the end of your work week, congratulations, you've made it through another week. For those of you who are just starting your work week, there's always tomorrow. So yeah, Twitch is up. All right. So happy Friday. This is going to bring us to the end of another week. Hopefully one step closer to being back to quote unquote normal. Good morning, mother. It's crazy. It's still pretty quiet on the streets. Obviously I'm in the office today. But I was looking at some stuff from James Clear as I was looking at, kind of what I've talked about this week. And one of the big things that I was looking at was he uses this, this circle, and it's got 3 rings, and in the center of that ring is your identity. And then the next ring out is the process, and then the outcomes. And it talks about the layers of behavior change, and how you have to change your processes, to help identify, right? So, and I was thinking about that because, in this book that I'm listening to now, they talk about he's a Navy SEAL, and then with like the whole SEAL creed and the ethos of what a Navy SEAL, the Navy SEALs and all of that, and it truly gives people an identity. When you're in a really specific field like that, or any of those, if you're a ranger, like you identify as a ranger or a SEAL, and people automatically know what that means. And given what we've talked about this week, again, I was thinking about that, and it's how many of you know what your identity is, and is your identity something that is fixed, or is it pliable? Is it, meaning, does your identity change over time? It should, because, you may, when you're in college, your identity is that, it might be that you're an athlete who plays, football and works out all the time and hates school and hates learning, but is there for sports. And then as you get a job, let's say you get a job on the stock market, you might be, your identity might morph into this guy who's, very aggressive in, making money and making a name for themselves in that field. So your identity can change, but you always want to be able to know what your identity is. And I think that right now, and a lot of people that I've talked to, even like this week and last week in the office, is a lot of people are, I say that people are just kind of existing. Like nobody's really, a lot of people aren't super active in, self-development. And I think that that's an area in which, again, if you have the downtime, why not create the steps needed to become the best version of yourself? Because once things get busy and once everything picks up again, you're not going to have that time. And then you're going to look back and say, man, I wish I had more time to work on, reading more. It's like, well, you had 12 weeks to do that. What the hell were you doing? So, and that's why I always say, like, you should come away from this whole quarantine thing with a new skill. And again, and it doesn't take, you don't have to put everything on your plate all at once. You can start with, I'm going to read 5 pages a day. I'm going to read 3 pages a day. I'm going to make sure that every day I at least read 2 pages first thing when I get up. It's going to take you forever to read a book, but you know what? If you don't pick up a book, you're never going to read it. So it's about making that small commitment to change. and identifying like the person that you want to become. If you want to be someone who's healthy, what are the traits, what are the characteristics of a healthy person? How many of those do you currently have? How many of those are you going to, how are you going to start to develop them? Those are all questions that you have to ask, and it can't be any of this, everyone gets a medal type of bullshit. It's got to be like legitimate questions of like, okay, I eat garbage 95% of the time, so I have to stop eating garbage 95% of the time, because that's what a healthy person would do. And again, when we talk about 80% of the population's unhealthy, that when that becomes the norm, there's a problem with that. So you have to start to look at your identity and say, am I really healthy or am I unhealthy? Am I part of the norm, or do I want to be part of this small 20% of the healthy population? If you want to be part of that 20%, where all of the numbers of mortality rate and dietary guidelines and everything is designed for, then you have to start making a change, and you have to figure out this identity. What do you want to become? You have to look at where do you want your outcomes to be? And then you can draw that line. Once you know what your identity is, what your outcomes are, then you can draw the line to say, okay, what are the processes needed for me to be able to get to that point? What do I have to do to be able to get to this outcome that I want, to help redefine my identity? I want to become a healthy person. I have to stop eating processed grains and stop eating processed food and start eating fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, lean meats, proteins, things like that. And then it's like, okay, we don't have to define it down to the little micro, to the gram. We can start on a macro level and say, okay, I have to stop eating Captain Crunch for breakfast and some other cereal for, my midnight snack. Like, I'm going to have some eggs or some oatmeal. I'm going to have some real food for breakfast instead. Start on that level and then expand on that. So, really looking at what you want to be, where you want to become, or where you want to go, and who you want to become as far as like what your identity is. And think back to like who your heroes are. Like, as a kid growing up, we all had heroes. And when you look at a hero, it could be your grandfather. It could be, you could have 10 heroes. It could be a baseball player. It could be your grandfather. It could be, someone else that family member that's been highly successful and, is living the life that you're like, man, I wish I could have a life like that. And it's like, but think now, say, okay, so what are they doing? How are they able to have the things that I want? Well, they're willing to put in the work when you're not, or do the things that you're not willing to do. That's why they have that. If you put in the same work and the same effort, and you're going to be able to get there one day. So, but that's where a lot of people, it's like, oh, well, I want this. And it's like, well, then what are you willing to sacrifice to make that happen? And again, and that's where a lot of people fall short. So, identity, process, outcome, it's 3 circles. In really, when we look at it, it's pretty straightforward, and it's just about, and again, like when you think of that 80% of the population is unhealthy, are you in that 80% or are you in that 20%? And where do you want to go? And if you truly want to change and you want to get better, then that's where this becomes very important. And it doesn't mean that you have to, go vegan. It doesn't mean that you have to go carnivore. It doesn't mean that you have to be keto, like any change can be an improvement based on what you're doing. Because, one of the things that I always say at a seminar or when I'm talking to a group of people is, hey, buddy, what's going on, Matt? Is, I'll ask the question, How many of you go grocery shopping every week? Everybody raises their hand. How many of you are looking to lose weight? 80% of the people raise their hand. How many of you buy the same thing every week when you go grocery shopping? 80% of those 80% raise their hand. So then my follow-up question is, how can you expect to lose weight if you're buying the same things you bought last week? And if you didn't lose weight last week, why would you lose weight this week? Right? Like, you have to start over. What you're doing is not working. So start over. And it's fine that you have to start over. And it's, you know, that's, again, that's where, like, when I say, like, when you fail and you fail forward, again, that's growth. You try something, it doesn't work. Try something. That doesn't mean you just, oh, I tried this, it didn't work, so I'm going to go sit on my ass and eat bonbons and Cheetos. Well, that's definitely not going to work. Giving up and quitting and just throwing your hands in the air and throwing a hissy fit like a 3-year-old is never going to solve a solution. So it's, you know, we live in this hypersensitive world now where everybody wants to do that because it's okay because everybody else is doing that. Well, guess what? Everybody else is overweight, out of shape, and unhealthy. You don't want to be part of that. So, you know, think about this, the identities, the process, and the outcome, and how what you're doing now is leading you to where you truly deep down want to be. And if you truly deep down want to be a better version of yourself, is what you're doing on a daily basis helping you get there? And if it's not, then you're doing it wrong and it's time to make a change. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's not a problem with making a change. Obviously, what you're doing is not working. So that doesn't mean, well, that didn't work, so I'm done. I give up. I tried. Well, it's just not for me. I guess I'm just going to die fat and happy and young. No. I mean, that is the equivalent of just copping out. That's the easy way out. If life was designed to be easy, you know, everybody would be dead. So, you know, I hope you guys have a great weekend. I really want you to start looking at where you are and where you want to be. And do you want to be part of that 80% or do you want to be part of that 20%? And if you want to be part of that 20%, what are you doing every day to make sure that you're working towards being part of that 20%? That means no days off. You don't get to say like, oh, well, you know, I was good for 3 days, so I can take 4 days off. Those 4 days, every day you have to ask yourself that same question. Is what I'm doing today helping me get to stay in the 80%, or is it helping move me to the 20%? If it's not helping you move to the 20%, then you failed the day, and it's time to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, kick yourself in your own ass, and move forward. So, hope you guys have a great weekend. Another beautiful day in the Syracuse area. I think it's supposed to cool down a little bit this weekend. So, you know, it'll give you a nice little break from the heat. But I hope you guys have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday. And stay safe out there. I was just reading some articles on a bicycle and car collision where the lady passed. So stay safe out there if you're on your bicycles or out running or outside doing anything. Pay attention. Always be the defensive person in any situation when you're, you know, car versus human. Human's always the defense. You know, so pay attention. Don't listen, you know, don't listen to any loud music or anything so that you can hear your surroundings. And you actually take in more when you do that. So have a great weekend. Be safe. Socially distance, you know the drill. All right, I'll see you guys Monday.